Trump gearing up for a major speech this week on illegal immigration. Good morning to you. I'm John Scott.
Nice to have you back, John.
Thank you.
Did you have a good week off?
A little vacation, good for the soul.
Come back looking refreshed. We want to hear all about it. Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee. The Republican presidential nominee tweeting out that he'll give that address Wednesday in Arizona, which comes after some very mixed signals from the Trump team over whether he's softening his campaign promise to deport some 11 million people. Trump Tower in New York City with more. John?
Jenna, good morning to you. Interesting to note, too, that Donald Trump has added 5 new battleground states to this week's ad buy for that total of $10 million, up from 4 in his previous ad buy. But when it comes to immigration, Donald Trump has been taking it from all sides, from conservatives who now clasp their hands to their faces and say, oh, my gosh, he's talking about amnesty now, from his former opponents in the primary campaign who say he's flip-flopped on one of the central issues of his campaign, to Democrats who say that Donald Trump can't seem to stay straight on any one given policy. The official word that we're getting from the Trump campaign is he's talking about a, quote, softening of his approach toward immigration, but not a softening of his policy. But even one of his closest advisors, Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York, is unclear on what the policy is actually going to be. Listen.
He's going to go after the most dangerous criminals first, then the less dangerous criminals second. And by the time we get there, then we'll see what our population is of non-criminal illegal immigrants. Are there some that would have some kind of status? Well short of path to citizenship, legalization. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Donald Trump also getting criticized over the weekend on another front. A tweet he sent out after Nikia Aldridge, Dwayne Wade's cousin, was gunned down in Chicago over the weekend as she was walking her baby down the street. She was going actually to a local school to register some of her children for school this fall. Donald Trump tweeted that this is what he's talking about in regards to the dangers of the inner cities, and this is why people are going to vote for Donald Trump. His opponents jumped on that, saying that he's politicizing the whole event, and that tweet even gave some of his senior campaign officials a bit of heartburn. Listen to Kellyanne Conway.
I was pleased that his next tweet expressed his condolences to the Wade family about the death of his cousin. But that horrifying example of a woman who had just signed up her children for school, pushing a baby stroller, that is a nonpartisan issue that should sicken us all.
Yeah, and certainly the nation is shocked by what happened there in Chicago. Donald Trump, though, effectively answering back some of his critics over the weekend. Donna Brazile, who's the interim chair of the Democratic National Committee, criticizing Donald Trump for launching an outreach program to African Americans in inner cities and saying he hasn't even showed up at a black church. This Saturday in Detroit, Donald Trump will do exactly that. He'll be at the Great Faith Ministries answering questions and then giving an address about how he would revitalize the inner cities and provide safety for all the citizens of the United States. Jenna?
Another big week ahead on the campaign trail. John, thank you.
Turning now to Trump's immigration speech expected this week. The GOP nominee tweeting out last night, I will be making a major speech on illegal immigration on Wednesday in the great state of Arizona. Big crowds looking for a larger venue. The speech could clear up some confusion about where Trump stands on the issue. Here's what his running mate, Governor Mike Pence, had to say over the weekend about whether his plan still includes a deportation force.
What you heard him describe there, in his usual plain-spoken American way, was a mechanism, not a policy.
His campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, also keeping it somewhat vague.
The softening is more approach than policy. We need to have a fair and humane way of addressing the fact that 11 million, or we don't even know the number, 11 million or so, as it is estimated, illegal immigrants live among us. He wants to find a fair and humane way.
Let's bring in Carrie Pickett from the Daily Caller and Jessica Tarlov, Democratic pollster and senior political strategist at Schoen Consulting. Welcome to both of you.
Good morning.
So, Jessica, it was in Donald Trump's announcement speech where he said he wanted to build this wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Presumably that is still in place.
Right. I think that's the only remaining facet that we're clear about the immigration policy, that the wall is getting built.
All right, but that's still that is something that his supporters find very satisfactory, isn't it?
They do, absolutely. I mean, I think really what's going on here is that Donald Trump knows that his base, the 40% that he has, is not going anywhere. There aren't other options for them. They don't want Gary Johnson. They don't want Evan McMullin, and they sure don't want crooked Hillary. So they're going to be in his camp. And this softer tone, which really is just, you know, the impact of Kellyanne Conway, I think a little bit maybe Mike Pence, certainly not Steve Bannon, is them thinking about what do we do to get independents and moderates. The problem is there's a total lack of clarity on what that actually means. Mike Pence doesn't know if there's a deportation force anymore. That wasn't rhetorical. He actually talked about that. He also talked about revoking birthright citizenship, which still exists as a major policy point for him and on his website. So these are the things that I'm looking for to hear from him clearly and declaratively on Wednesday. Are the 11 million people getting kicked out? If they are getting kicked out, when can they come back? Because he said that he wants the good ones to come back in right through that magic door or whatever it is that he's going to create in this fantasy wall. So that's what I'm looking for here. I don't think it's going to be a winning approach. I think that Donald Trump on immigration is never going to get there. 65% of Americans favor a pathway to citizenship, including over 50% of Republicans. But clarity is the name of the game for Wednesday.
But, you know, Kerry, back in the Reagan administration, Ronald Reagan signed immigration reform, and it was going to end this problem once and for all. We weren't going to have, you know, this situation with millions of illegal immigrants in this country. Donald Trump obviously appealed to the base. He was pretty strong on immigration when he won the nomination to win that nomination. Is this a sign that he's moving more toward the center, moving away from some of his tougher positions to try to win the general election?
Not necessarily. Remember, John, when Ronald Reagan did that particular piece of legislation, Hispanics, Latinos really didn't go towards Republicans anymore. It's still sort of capped at around 30%. Now, look, Donald Trump really needs to assure his staunch anti-amnesty supporters know that he's still going to build that wall. And remember, this wall has been essentially been going on since around 2005 with the Secure Fence Act. It's just that they ended up losing funding towards the Obama administration when it ended up dying in committee. So this isn't a new thing. Ultimately, Hillary Clinton's going to have to start answering questions about immigration as well, whether or not people really want to see a 550% increase in Syrian refugees coming into the country. And keep in mind, sanctuary cities, that's also a very huge issue. There was a poll that came out out of Berkeley saying 74% of Californians don't want to see sanctuary cities anymore. So that's an issue that Hillary Clinton's going to have to deal with as well, not just Donald Trump.
There aren't many countries in the world that I know of, Jessica, where you can just sort of walk across the border or, you know, take a flight in and just overstay your visa and nothing happens to you.
Well, I mean, that's not exactly true that that's the case here. I mean, Obama earned that title deporter-in-chief for a reason.
Well, we've got 11 million at least.
We do. Well, 11 million. They didn't come in during the Obama administration. I mean, this has been a problem, an issue that's gone on for decades, which is actually Donald Trump's point when he said that a lot of these people have been here for generations, right?
Well,
and they have children who are Americans here.
I said Ronald Reagan supposedly ended the problem once and for all, and it has just blown up in our face.
I wouldn't say that it's blown up in our face. If you look at it, it's 11 million people. You're not talking about, we have a population of 320 million. It's a very small percentage.
Well, it's a significant percentage of a problem that was supposed to have been fixed back in the 80s.
I don't disagree at all. I think that it's important that we talk about the fact that 40% of the people who are here illegally are visa overstays. They're not these criminals that Donald Trump is talking about. And also that his policy, if it is, as Rudy Giuliani said over the weekend, to remove those who are criminals, that's Obama's policy. So he's going to have to differentiate himself that way. I think just mimicking what President Obama, King Liberal, has done over the last 8 years is not going to work out that well for him. But it is an issue, and Hillary Clinton has spoken about this before in securing the border, and I think she's even flirted with a wall there. So, you know, it's not like he's making these things up, as you say. It comes from Ronald Reagan, and probably talking about it even before then. But it's really the tone and tenor of what he's talking about. And the problem is that when he reads a teleprompter speech, that isn't genuine. What's genuine is how he was freestyling at the beginning of this, when he was talking about Mexicans as criminals and rapists. And that's what's complicated for me here, and for a lot of Americans.
But Jessica, first of all, the whole deporter-in-chief title is complete bull.
You
have to remember. No, it is bull, because the Obama administration happens to be including same-day deportations. And that happens to be a new way to count deportations, a way that was never counted before in past administrations. So it ends up hiking numbers completely in a way that is completely false.
So we haven't had a net flow out of Mexican immigrants, because I believe that's what the statistics show.
No, they are counting same-day deportations. That was never counted before. It ends up hiking numbers in a way that is completely false. Other administrations never did that before. So it's very similar to the way the Department of Labor ends up dealing with the unemployment rate. So
you mean when they include children who are in school to inflate the numbers and senior citizens who can't work? Is that what you're talking about?
We're going to have to leave it there.
No, I'm talking about they end up hiking their numbers. That's all.
All right. We're going to leave it there. We're arguing about a policy that we haven't even heard yet, but that'll come on Wednesday.
Maybe one day we will.
All right, Jessica and Carrie.
Thanks, John.
Donald Trump has done it before. Now his vice presidential nominee, Governor Mike Pence, is sounding a familiar theme as he takes aim at the media while trying to defend Trump's evolving stand on immigration. Take a listen.
I know the media wants to focus on that one issue. Donald Trump will articulate a policy about how we deal with that population, but I promise you he is going to remain completely focused on American citizens and people who are here legally and how we get this.
I don't understand why
people who play by the rules.
I don't understand why it's the fault of the media for focusing on an issue that you're crediting Donald Trump for bringing to the fore.
Yeah.
The idea is Mr. Trump won the primaries in no small way because he had this very forceful position saying all 11 or 12 million undocumented immigrants will be forced to leave the country. Now, you right this minute are not saying that that's the policy. Well, you're saying he's going to be unveiling it in the next few weeks. It's 72 days until the election.
Well, the way you characterize his position is one thing. I think he's been completely...
We just ran the clip.
Look, Jake, he's been completely consistent in the principles that he's articulated.
Joining us now, Alan Colmes, host of The Alan Colmes Show, nationally syndicated by Fox News Radio, and Lawrence Jones, Blaze TV Radio host of The Lawrence Jones Show. Welcome to both of you.
Hi, John.
The Trump campaign, Lawrence, has said that the media is partly to blame for fueling some of these perceived problems within the campaign. Is it that, or is Donald Trump being squishy on the immigration issue?
Well, John, I believe Donald Trump is going back and forth on positions, but as well as Hillary Clinton. We know that after every single primary, whether it was when Barack Obama ran or Hillary Clinton ran the first time, that they began to migrate toward the center. And I think the media should cover both candidates and how they've changed, but they're not doing that.
The media are not doing that? Why?
Because they have a political incentive. I mean, I don't understand why they wouldn't cover this election fairly, because Donald Trump has given them the most access. But we know that there is a progressive media there that are defending Hillary Clinton.
All right. It has been an awful long time, Alan, since Hillary Clinton held an actual news conference. 339 days, I think, is the latest number. Shouldn't she have one?
Sure. But why should she if she's doing so well and she's seeing another campaign implode? I mean, what she's doing is working. I mean, as members of the media,
dodging.
As members of the media,
hang on, Lawrence.
As members of the media, I'd certainly like to see her do more national interviews. I'd love to get her on my show. I'd love to see her more accessible, absolutely. But from a purely strategic standpoint, politically, while Trump is imploding and tweeting stuff out that he's got to then clean up and keeping to change his position on immigration, why not sit back and watch them implode?
But doesn't that leave the American people starved for information?
Well, they're not starved for information. She's putting out policy positions. Just today, she's putting out a position on mental health. She's actually talking about policy where Donald Trump is busy spending his time cleaning up, or his surrogates on his behalf. Look at what Mike Pence just had to do, cleaning up the mess he leaves.
Lawrence,
no, Alan, she said. No, Alan. She sends out press releases and she puts stuff on her website instead of facing the American people and the press in defending her policies. Well, liberals like you want to get on TV and defend her, but she can't defend herself.
She doesn't let the media into her fundraising events, Alan.
Well,
she has, according to the latest Washington Post poll, 62% of the American people think she is not honest and trustworthy. So why not go out there and, submit yourself to a news conference and try to answer some of these questions?
I just said I wish she would. I'd like to see her do a news conference, but I'll repeat myself, from a purely political strategic standpoint, why should she? The Trump campaign, you played that clip of Jake Tapper just using Trump's own words. He says to Sean Hannity he's hardening on immigration. Next day to Anderson Cooper, I'm softening on immigration. Deportation force, then no deportation force. It's incomprehensible, which is why you've got Republicans jumping off his ship and supporting Hillary Clinton. He's got incomprehensible positions, and since he's sucking all the oxygen out of the room and putting out tweets about, tragedies that he then takes credit for, that's what's going to get media attention.
Go ahead, Lawrence.
John, the reality of it is that both of these candidates suck. Their approval ratings are horrible. They're not. Hold on, Alan. The bottom line is this. The American people don't like either of the candidates. They don't trust Hillary Clinton. They don't trust Donald Trump. Why can't the media cover how both of them suck fairly?
Well, they don't suck equally. That's the problem. If they suck equally, there's not. I don't look. The equivalency, the other-siderism equivalency argument doesn't apply here. As bad as you may think Hillary Clinton is, Donald Trump is 100 times worse based on the way he's behaving in this campaign.
Well,
no, Hillary Clinton has just served and put national security at risk, whereas Donald Trump has never served.
Well, that's interesting because you've got a bunch of Bush national security advisors, people from the Bush administration, who are supporting Hillary Clinton. That really says a lot, doesn't it?
All right.
And it doesn't matter because, go ahead.
Well, go ahead. Final thought, Lawrence.
It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, we know that Hillary Clinton put national security at risk. Nobody trusts her.
Tell me why was put at risk.
Yeah, there were intelligence in her private emails, and me and you both know that if she was an average day citizen like me and you, she would be behind bars.
Tell me what was put at risk. You have an FBI director who's a Republican decided not to indict.
National security.
So tell me
national security.
How are we put at risk? Can you cite what was said in an email that put us at risk?
Anytime, hold on, Alan, I'll answer your question. Don't monologue me. Anytime there is intelligence in your private email where anybody, hackers, like the FBI director said, you have put national security at risk.
Tell me what was said that put us at risk. I don't know what it was.
Well, none of us knows what was in those emails, partly because...
because we don't get the intelligence.
So many of them were destroyed. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very much.
Thanks, John.
Lawrence Jones, Alan Colmes.
Thank you.
Talk to you again.
Directly related to the Hillary Clinton campaign, but has to do with a key member of her team. Huma Abedin, a key advisor for her, just releasing a statement announcing the separation from her husband, former Congressman Anthony Weiner. As I'm sure you're aware, Congressman Weiner went through a huge scandal involving sexting pictures of himself over social media to strangers, to other women, many years ago. And the New York Post just broke a story this morning that showed, perhaps alleging, that he is doing it yet again. Unfortunately, one of the pictures that apparently he sent to another woman also included his son in that picture, which made it even more outrageous, as I'm sure if you haven't seen the cover, you can imagine. So here's a statement coming from Huma Abedin. After long and painful consideration and work on my marriage, I made the decision to separate from my husband. Anthony and I remain devoted to doing what is best for our son, who is the light of our life. During this difficult time, I ask for respect for our privacy. So that's the news of the day. Regardless of political affiliation, I'm sure we can all imagine how difficult it is to see a marriage dissolve. So we'll wait and watch for more news from the Clinton camp, if there is any. In the meantime, a fatal shooting in Chicago renewing focus on the city's escalating gun violence. Two brothers are now charged with murder after a mother of four was gunned down on a sidewalk while pushing her baby in a stroller. 32-year-old Nakia Aldridge is NBA star Dwayne Wade's cousin. She died late Friday of multiple gunshot wounds. On Sunday, police arrested two suspects who they say were targeting someone else when they shot Aldridge. Both are convicted felons.
Her life was cut short by gunfire from two convicted felons who were both out on parole, one of whom was on his daily break from an electronic monitoring bracelet. This reprehensible act of violence is the example of why we need to change the way we treat habitual offenders in the city of Chicago. When will enough be enough? This tragedy isn't just noteworthy because Miss Aldridge has a famous family member. It's noteworthy because these two offenders are the prime example of the challenge we face here in Chicago with repeat gun offenders that don't care who they shoot, don't care whose life they take, and clearly don't fear the consequences of their actions.
John Spilborn is a former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney. Bob Bianchi is a criminal defense attorney, former head county prosecutor and trial attorney. Just want to add to this. So this shooting happened on Friday. Since Friday, according to the local ABC station in Chicago, 9 people were killed in Chicago. 50 others were shot. And so the question that we're posing today is, what do we do about this? It's the question for candidates, but we're curious your perspective, having worked in the legal system. Bob, what do you think of what was just said there?
You know, Jenna, I was in charge of gangs, drugs as the head county prosecutor, and there are intelligence-led policing mechanisms that we can follow to limit this kind of activity. And it starts with police, who seem to do a very good job. Note they've identified 1,400 violent criminal gang offenders who use drugs. These 2 individuals, I believe, got out of prison way too early. They were placed on parole, electronic monitoring. And here's to me what the biggest problem is. With intelligence-led policing, with the ability that we have, they actually took one of them off the monitoring to go, quote unquote, look for a job. That was a mistake. The second thing that we need to do is geospatially map these individuals so that if you're on electronic monitoring and you're within close proximity to somebody else who's been identified as one of those 1,400 people, because birds of a feather flock together, parole can immediately alert law enforcement, and they should interdict. And if they did in this particular case, and I'm not suggesting law enforcement did it wrong, but it's better vision, better policies, using technology. They may have caught these guys with guns, and that would have been a ticket right back to prison.
All I think about is dollar signs, though, John, how much that's going to cost, how much manpower in some of these struggling police departments that are already overextended.
But then again, how much of a value do we put on innocent loss of lives? I mean, here's the problem. We do have a revolving door policy in prisons, and then it's a joke. The fact that one of these criminals was out to look for a job, not on his electronic monitoring, so he could go get a job. He's a 26-year-old career felon. What kind of job is he going to get? Letting him off his electronic monitoring to look for a job is a joke.
Well, tell us about that. How did that happen? Because obviously there had to be some legal maneuvering to have him.
It's bad administration, and in fact, one of those
totally bad administration.
One of them actually had been convicted before for violating his electronic monitoring in another instance,
and for gun charges.
And I respectfully disagree.
So who's at fault? Because that's the question.
Listen,
who's at fault for that?
Here's at fault. The people at fault, in my opinion, from what I've dealt with, and we were talking about this offset, is that there are people that have the ability to understand aggressive, effective law enforcement, balancing civil rights, protecting our police officers, but also ferreting out police misconduct. But when we get into a room and the people that know what they're talking about come up with answers, by the time it goes back out as a policy, it gets ripped apart by the politicians. These people that are living in these communities, these good, decent people whose kids are going to school, these people who want to live a good life, are being ravaged by a small number of people. And my last point on this is, it doesn't cost more money. These technologies actually save money.
But also, Jenna, you cannot, if somebody's in prison for a 6-year sentence on a gun charge, let them stay in prison for 6 years on the gun charge. Don't let them out with good time credits in half of that amount of time. If that had happened here, we'd have one less life that wasn't lost. I mean, we have to keep the violent criminals behind bars, and the non-violent criminals shouldn't be behind bars. They can be rehabilitated.
How do we fix this?
You know, you talk about resources. How do you fix it? And that was a very good point. We are warehousing people in prison with these mandatory sentencing laws that are non-violent offenders who are really mentally ill or addicted, and we should be taking those resources out towards rehabilitation, not putting them in the prison system. And me as a prosecutor, and I think most prosecutors and police in this country would all say that we need to take these violent offenders, these people that represent what these 2 individuals represent, and put all our resources into them. So this is the way you fix it. You don't put good people that made a mistake and just hit a fly with a sledgehammer. These guys are the flies that should have been hit with a sledgehammer, and they weren't. They were allowed to go back on the street and commit another heinous crime.
John, what do you think?
Well, it also begs the question, why are we raising career criminals in this country when everybody should have the same resources to not do that? To have a 22-year-old and a 26-year-old with 6 or 7 felony convictions is not acceptable. This is America. We need to do more to prevent that from happening, and then we can hopefully end the cycle 100 years from now.
Well, and that's really the next question that brings us into another territory, the timeline on all of this, including the resources. Bob and John, great to have your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Begin with unprecedented poll numbers in the race for the White House. Welcome to the second hour of Happening Now. I'm John Scott.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenna Lee. And new Monmouth polling shows both major party presidential nominees are facing a big problem with voters. 51% of them have an unfavorable view of Hillary Clinton. 57% feel that way about Donald Trump. The numbers also show just 2% of voters have a positive opinion of both candidates. Take that one in. In the meantime, Clinton continues to lead Trump in the national race, 46% to 39%. Trump's hoping to make up some ground this week with a highly anticipated speech on immigration. Our chief political correspondent, Carl Cameron, is live in San Francisco with the very latest for us now. Carl?
Hi, Jenna, and Mr. Trump will be here for a fundraiser tonight in Northern California. He'll spend some time in Beverly Hills, and then he's got a West Coast swing that will include that immigration speech on Wednesday in Phoenix. And he's got quite some challenges because of his own immigration utterances on the campaign trail over the last couple of weeks. There are some vague and sort of open-ended issues about what his immigration plan will actually be when it comes to deporting the 11 million undocumented aliens in the country right now. This morning, Rudy Giuliani, who is deeply involved with Trump's debate prep and policy formation, suggested that in many ways, Trump's approach is identical to what the Gang of Eight, the Republican Senate, adopted, and what Marco Rubio and Jeb Bush and others, even though Trump criticized those who supported that very aggressively for the last couple of years. Listen to Rudy Giuliani this morning on Fox and Friends.
He's going to start in the right way. He's going to go after the most dangerous criminals first, then the less dangerous criminals second. And by the time we get there, then we'll see what our population is of non-criminal illegal immigrants. And I think that's the point at which he has to decide.
And he has to decide whether there will be any path to legalization for some of those otherwise law-abiding illegal immigrants, as well as what he would do in terms of visas and immigration from other countries. So he's preparing for that big speech on Wednesday. At the same time, he's getting ready for the debates. Two major challenges when the polls show he's down 7 points against Hillary Clinton in the national overall race. And to some extent, that explains why both the Democrat and Republican nominees are looking closely at the Green Party candidate and the Libertarian Party for possible votes and how that will affect things. It's quite likely that we could have a winner for this election under 50%. Jenna?
That would be interesting. Immigration, a big issue in my hometown. My parents live about 10 minutes away from you, Carl. Do you want them to bring you lunch? I mean, they could just run it over if you'd like. You and the crew?
Love the seafood in San Francisco. We'll take just about anything.
All right, that's a hint. Tuna fish it is. All right, Carl, thank you very much. Enjoy the beautiful day in San Francisco. Hillary Clinton facing new pay-to-play allegations today as some new emails reveal that the Clinton Foundation requested invitations for some of its big donors to high-profile State Department functions. Interim DNC Chair Donna Brazile denies any wrongdoing.
Actually gave someone 50 cents to say, I need a meeting. No.
Republican vice presidential nominee Mike Pence weighing in as well.
This becomes a conduit for people to gain access, and gaining access is a favor.
ABC Saturday's associate editor and columnist for Real Clear Politics, John McCormick, is senior writer for the Weekly Standard. Nice to have you both. AB, we've talked about emails a lot. What's new about this batch?
Well, I think we're seeing from the most recent emails in the last 5 days or so a strong connection between the foundation and the top aides of Hillary Clinton at the State Department, where no matter what happened as a result of those communications, there's a direct connection between the State Department and the foundation. When requests come through into the secretary's office at the top level of her staff, like Huma Abedin, you see her expressing nervousness about passing one request on. Another time she had said, well, I'll just go process this through the official channels, meaning that sometimes it went through the official channels and sometimes it didn't, more of a sort of a personal favor or visit. And there was a lot of talk from Doug Band, telling Huma Abedin, another top aide, this is a friend of ours, and a lot of requests for things like, coming to an event, a lunch, a dinner, sitting next to this person and that, one of them whom was the vice president. Access and information really is a favor in and of itself. And while Donna Brazile is correct that politicians and many public office holders do take meetings and grant visits and special time to their donors and supporters, and they always have in both parties, she was running for president. This is the only foundation where someone was definitely going to run for president again, and everyone giving to the foundation knew it. And that's why Mike Pence is right that if you were a foreign country, you'd be smart to leverage your influence with the potential next administration by giving to the foundation.
Interesting. ABC received some of these emails, John. And so Huma is in the State Department. She's the aide to Hillary Clinton. Doug is with the foundation. And there's a couple email exchanges, as AB points out, where they're talking about seating at a lunch that the State Department is hosting. And there's one email where Huma sends Doug an RSVP list. Now, ABC says they don't have the list. It didn't come with the batch of emails that they received. But one assumes that the RSVP list was in that email to the foundation. And that raises some interesting security questions as well, doesn't it?
It really does, you know, I mean, and you got to remember here, Hillary Clinton herself suggested that any connection between what the foundation did and what she did in her official role would have been appropriate. She just said back in July that there was nothing that she did in her official capacity that had anything to do with the foundation. And we get these emails that, as you point out, you know, raise security concerns even, that they were going back and forth about this. And we don't even know for sure whether these requests were grants, because the State Department will not say whether or not these requests for donors to get seated at a lunch with the Chinese president. One of them even requested specifically to be seated next to Vice President Joe Biden. We don't know whether those were actually went through, but the fact that those even exist, the fact that there was this back and forth between the two, definitely is inappropriate. And you know, Clinton herself suggested that this would be inappropriate.
Inappropriate, but perhaps, and at least as of right now, AB, not criminal. So then we have to go back to the question of, we have new emails as we're starting off a new week yet again. But does it matter? Will it matter for the election?
Well, I think you see Democrats arguing that her untrustworthy numbers are so high, in some polls higher than Donald Trump's, but she's still ahead of him because people have accepted that she's not to be trusted, but that she's preferable to Donald Trump. That might be true, and we'll all look back, you know, in mid-November and look at the exit polling and decide that that's what the, you know, that's the gamble that a majority of voters made. I don't know. I think because you have spoiler candidates, because so much of this is really, you know, a volatile election season, an angry public looking for change, and the fact that these emails could be released up until, in surprising ways, not just the State Department turns them over because a judge forces them to, but leaked by, you know, any number of sources. There is always the potential for a surprise, and she's going to have to continue to try using surrogates, since she's hiding from the press, to make the case that there will never be, you know, any kind of pattern, as you said, of public corruption that will be evidenced by the emails that would arise before Election Day. Remember, the FBI field offices, several asked the DOJ head the Justice Department to investigate the Clinton Foundation, and that request was turned down. So we don't know everything about the Clinton Foundation yet.
And of course, let's just take in the news from Carl Cameron that we just reported top of the hour, John. 2% of voters say that they like the candidates. I mean, that is so low. So to AB's point, do you think voters have already accepted, okay, this is part of the Clinton machine, and that is what it is, but she's running against Donald Trump, and we have to pick one or the other? How do you think it figures in?
I mean, I think on one hand, voters already know both of these candidates. Obviously, Donald Trump's gotten something like $3 billion of earned media. Hillary Clinton's been around for decades. But, you know, this continual drip, 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 reminding people of the corruption of Hillary Clinton. There's been a pattern, you know, all the way back to 2000. My colleague Steve Hayes reported just this week, reminded everyone that in 2000 she went to this fundraiser hosted by Pakistani-American doctors. A week later, Bill Clinton changed his itinerary, went to go visit Pakistan when he thought he wasn't supposed to. So voters reminded, you know, if you vote for Hillary Clinton, this is what you're going to get, this kind of low-level or even maybe bigger level corruption is going to come with the Hillary Clinton presidency. Donald Trump just has to convince people that, you know, he can pass the presidential litmus test, the commander-in-chief litmus test. So far, I don't think he's done that. That's why he's down the polls, but you never know. There's still 2 months left.
That's true. And of course, you know, just a reminder, foreign entities are not supposed to have any interaction in our elections. It's not allowed. They're not supposed to donate. And so one wonders if that's kind of the next big question that's coming up about these foreign donors and where their money went to. AB, John, thank you very much. Great to have you both. Of course, the issue with refugees taking place today.
Democrats, of course, are hoping to win the White House in November, but that is not all. They're also making a play for the House of Representatives. A new article in the New York Times says Democrats are trying to capitalize on Donald Trump's unpopularity. It reads, quote, emboldened by Donald J. Trump's struggles in the presidential race, Democrats in Congress are laying the groundwork to expand the list of House Republicans they will target for defeat as part of an effort to slash the Republicans' 30-seat majority and even reclaim control if Mr. Trump falls further. Let's talk about these prospects with Ed Rollins. He's former White House advisor to President Reagan, Fox News political analyst, and the co-chairman of the Great America PAC, which is a pro-Trump PAC, we should mention. Hank Scheinkopf, also with us on the right of your screen, former Democratic consultant for the Clinton-Gore campaign. In simple terms, Hank, explain to us why it is that an unpopular candidate at the top of the ticket might affect, your local congressional race.
Crossover voting is not the norm in American politics. It's very hard to get voters to go from line to line. They tend to vote in a straight line. It's just complicated. And what will happen here is with a Trump who's very unpopular, people say, wait a second, they'll just come down that column. Now, there are 9 or 10 Senate races that are marginal at best. The Republicans are in very serious trouble in 5 of them anyway, off the top. The House is another story. The House is not likely to turn Republican, but the number of seats that can be picked up may grow exponentially depending upon how bad this gets.
Hank says that Donald Trump is unpopular. Hillary Clinton is unpopular as well, although she is ahead of him in the national poll.
The critical change, and I used to be chairman of the Congressional Committee many years ago, so I know a lot about House races. It used to be that the top of the ticket sometimes was splitting votes. Sometimes you could basically vote for the president and one party and go down and vote the other. It's pretty much now over 90%. If you're a Republican, you're going to vote for the Republican Senate candidate, presidential candidate, House candidate. So the worry that the Republicans have is there drop-off in Trump's support among Republicans. If he gets off 10, 15% of the normal Republican vote, that's going to have an impact down the field. The bottom line is there's enough time here for most of these Republicans in these districts. They know the districts a lot better than Trump does. They'll start running independently of him, and there's sufficient resources out there. But if they lose 15 or 20 seats, which is possible, then they're going to have a very tough time making the game work.
You've seen prominent Republicans say, I'm not going to vote for Donald Trump. You've also seen, members of Congress like Mike Coughlin out in Colorado take out ads saying that he doesn't think much of Trump and he will stand up against him if need be. Is that part of what's going on here? Part of the attempt to insulate themselves?
It's part of the attempt to insulate. The question is how successful it will be. In previous cases, it's not really been that successful when you've had controversial Republicans running for president or trying to be reelected as president. Ditto on the Democrat side. You've had these wipeouts. People tend to react in particular ways when they're given the information they are, and protecting yourself from a tidal wave is very difficult.
So talk to us, Ed, about the prospects. I mean,
well, first of all, there's a long ways to go before this race is over. I mean, I think it's going to be much closer than the polls indicate today. And if it comes down to a 3 or 4% race either way, a lot of those incumbents can save themselves. It's about a 5-point gap. If Trump loses by 5 points, then probably everybody can make it. If he loses by 10 points, then it's going to be very hard. If he obviously wins, the game is totally different.
But obviously, at the same time, the House and the Senate are different animals. Are you making projections at this point about the prospects for the Democrats in the Senate?
Senate is generally a fair fight. The House is, frankly, more challenging for Democrats because the Republicans were wise enough to be able to elect the houses, the state houses and senates where reapportionment decisions were made. Therefore, those lines were drawn for Republicans. The fact that many of those Republicans are now in trouble is an indication of how serious the Trump problem is for Republicans overall.
If suburban and rural voters don't turn out and vote for Trump, then Republicans will have a difficult time in the House.
Absolutely accurate.
But he is not a traditional Republican. Does he still affect Republican ballots and voters in the same way?
Absentee ballots start in a couple weeks, and so a lot of people go in and vote way before they see the final ads and the final expenditures of money. It really depends on they get out the vote effort. I think both sides have a lot of money, and they're not dependent on Trump for the money. And so my sense is if you know today that you're in a district and you're in trouble, you're doing your own polling, you're going to make all kinds of alterations to your own campaign.
Suburbs will determine the outcomes here. Rural areas, yeah, but suburbs, certainly. Suburban voters who decide Trump's too much, they used to vote for Republicans, they were independents. They're the ones who can decide the outcomes here.
Especially in Ohio and Florida.
Absolutely. Even if we lose 15 seats in the House, though, we have a 30-seat margin. That'll change the dynamics dramatically.
Ed Rollins, Hank Scheinkopf. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
Jenna.
Well, a new element for the Trump and Clinton campaigns to watch in some key toss-up states. The population shift, what's sparking it, and how it's creating a new political divide. We're live with that story. And another look at the politics right now, and population shifts now taking place inside states across our country. And that could play a key role in the presidential election as the economy drives folks from rural to urban areas, creating a political divide in closely watched states like Colorado, for example. Alicia Cunha is live in Denver with the very latest for us on this. Alicia?
Hi, Jenna. Yes, we've known for a long time that in the rural areas, you're going to find more Republicans in the cities Democrats. But the Pew Research Institute found it's becoming even more so. Plus, the cities are growing while rural America is shrinking. Key toss-up states like Virginia, North Carolina, and especially Colorado have the greatest economic gap between city and country, according to a report from the Economic Innovation Group. And where the economies are the most robust, you'll find the most political clout.
It is a real thing. We're seeing some very negative aspects happen in rural America, and urban areas have really been leading the economic growth. We've actually seen a decline in population between 2010 and 2015 in rural America, while cities have been growing quite rapidly.
In Colorado, for example, almost all of the growth has been in the north-south urban corridor, where Denver is located, and a lot of Democrats. The rural, eastern, and western parts of the state trend Republican. Voter registration in this state is shifting from solidly purple to more blue. And you see Otero County there on the map. That's where we found Eric Van Dyke, a farmer and rancher. He told us folks are struggling to sustain their families and stretch their dollars, and says they don't feel the current administration is listening. So he's voting for Trump.
A lot of the laws that are written by our politicians are to benefit Colorado, but it benefits the people in the city that control the votes, and a lot of times it doesn't benefit the people that are out here feeding them.
In Denver, we met Ellen Dumm, a successful public relations consultant who works from home. A Democrat, she says she's voting for Hillary Clinton.
8 years ago, we were in the midst of the worst economic recession that I'd ever experienced in my lifetime. So I think definitely in the last 8 years, things have improved.
And Jenna, just to be clear, we're not saying that you're not going to find Republicans in the city of Denver, of course you are, or Democrats out in the farmland. It's just another example of how polarized we've become as a country. Jenna.
An interesting look for us, Alicia. Thank you.
President Obama signing a massive bill to overhaul the Veterans Affairs Department 2 years ago this month. The measure passed with support from both sides of Congress, but how much has really changed when it comes to veterans health care? Doug McElway live from the White House with an update. Doug.
That's right, John. This was a $16.3 billion bill, and it was done with tremendous urgency because both sides of the aisle saw the need to change the VA. So what kind of progress has been made? Well, not much if you ask former retired Army Sergeant Steve Cooper. He has been diagnosed recently with stage 4 prostate cancer, and in his frustration to try to see doctors, to try to see nurses in a timely fashion, he wore a recording device into meetings with doctors and nurses. Here's a little bit of what he recorded.
It just irritates the living hell out of me.
Is the VA the best system in the world? No. No. Obviously, but I can only do what I can do. I got given 500 patients on May 23rd. 500. Take it. It's almost impossible.
We know that this type of behavior, this type of care, this inability for the government to effectively manage its health care is happening constantly throughout the country.
Now, in contrast to that, Veterans Secretary Bob McDonnell spoke at the AMVETS convention earlier this month. He cited tremendous improvements. Here's what he had to say.
97% of appointments are now completed within 30 days of veterans' preferred date. 91% within 14 days, 85% within 7 days, and 22% are completed the very same day.
But the VA continues to demonstrate mismanagement and inefficiencies in a variety of other ways that were posted in recent Inspector General reports. Here's among a few highlights. In Houston, supervisors instructed staff to falsely record 223 cancellations as canceled by the patient. 94 of them were rescheduled, but with an average wait time of 81 days. In Little Rock, the VA spent $8 million on solar panels 4 years after the originally scheduled completion date. It is still not finished. And in Detroit, they bought 300 patient room TV sets, never installed because they were the wrong size. They remain in storage. John, back to you.
Unbelievable. Doug McElway at the White House. Doug, thanks, and we'll be right back.